Hibiscus base with blueberry accents. Hello, dudes, dudettes, duders, and everyone in between, and welcome to How to Do Everything So You Don't Have to, the series where we teach you how to think like a producer. Year one purchases are some of the most difficult choices you'll have to make as you start a new business. These choices would be challenging enough if the only concern were the hard cost of the gear you need to function. Unfortunately, this challenge is compounded by the fact that your assumptions regarding what your business needs will differ to some degree from the realities that play out as you actually find yourself a client base and cut a groove. When you're starting a new business or line of work as a freelancer, there's a desire to jump into the fray highly competitive. The reality is that it's a highly competitive field, especially if you're operating out of a major metropolitan area. The biggest problem that I see as a producer is that people think that it's the technology that keeps them competitive. And if I'm being honest, I don't think it's a coincidence that the earlier someone is in their career, the more likely they are to believe this. While there is some truth to the concern, it's not really feasible to shoot a film with no camera whatsoever. The latest, greatest, and coincidentally most expensive gear is not as essential at the start of your career as the social media marketing department of camera manufacturers would have you believe. In this video, I'm going to share with you what I've learned about the first year of starting a media consulting business. This is a collection of opinions that have coalesced over 2 decades of running consulting companies, one in Japan and one in Los Angeles. To be clear, these are opinions, not facts. You know your ambitions better than I could ever pretend to, and you'll be doing your business more favors by listening to your gut than some guy on the internet, even if I do have the best haze machine. Let's get into it, starting with the 90-10 theorem. Since this is a video of opinions and not facts, I wanted to start out with some cold, hard, number-based opinions, specifically the 90-10 theorem. This is the concept that 90% of the time, you'll be using your gear at 10% capacity. For example, if you're a cinematographer, you might think that the camera is the be-all, end-all of your career. But remember that for every hour you spend shooting, you'll be spending 9 hours doing data management, pre-production meetings, editing, rendering, delivery, reviewing feedback, cleaning and resetting kit, invoicing, chasing up on invoicing, and so on and so on and so on. This will be even more exaggerated at the start of your career when you have to do all of that plus the networking, marketing, and paperwork required to get a business off the ground. So, if you're putting 10 grand into a camera package and it's sitting idle 90% of the time, that's kind of like taking 9 grand off the table for your business that could have been used for something else. Please keep in mind that the primary concern as a year one cinematographer isn't going to be dethroning Roger Deakins. It's going to be staying solvent, and you're going to have a hard time staying solvent if you've got 90% of your capital sitting around in gear that isn't being used to the edges of its capacity. If you're thinking that you could offset cost by listing the gear on ShareGrid or KitSplit, I'd strongly encourage you to reconsider. We could do a whole video about how destructive outsourcing the foundational pillars of your business to third-party platforms can be, but suffice to say, if a business takes a percentage of every transaction you do, you're giving them equity. If they can unilaterally change their percentage take without consulting you, you're basically giving them a controlling seat on the board of directors. These things might not feel valuable when you're starting your career and all you have is debt, but if there's one thing you take away from this channel, it's that you should be planning for growth and success, not stasis and failure. The second worst mistake you can make as a producer is assuming that success is inevitable. The worst mistake you can make is assuming success is impossible. When you give away equity without considering the future value of your business, you're operating as if success isn't a part of your business plan. When you give away financial control of your business, you won't be in control of your finances. Don't leverage the cost of gear against imagined money in the future. What you pay for your equipment is what it costs you. The value you derive from that gear is up to you, though. Look, I started my first consulting business in Japan shooting on a Canon 7D with the cheapest 50mm lens on the market. Our entire camera kit at the time, including the bag, batteries, media, and a monopod, came in at around $2,000. That, along with an Apple MacBook, not a Pro mind you, the cheapest one they made, was the foundation of the business in Japan. It wasn't long before we were shooting on Reds, and within 5 years we were servicing Fortune 500 and even Fortune 10 companies. Every piece of gear had to be upgraded along the way, but we were able to start the project with a very small investment. If we had purchased it on a credit card with 25% APR and took a year to pay it off, the total cost would have been around $2,500. Not bad, all things considered. While the gear differed when we opened shop in LA, the starter kit wasn't that different, the biggest change being that we swapped out the 7D for a Blackmagic Pocket 6K, and we got a Sigma 18-35 to go along with the 50mm as our generic kit lenses. It's been a couple of years since then, and now we're doing mid-six figures. Did we want to be shooting on an airy year one in LA? Duh, yeah, but the business couldn't shoulder that financial weight. If it had, we wouldn't have been able to hire freelancers when the work came in. We wouldn't have been able to incorporate or hire an accountant. We would have been sitting there with $100,000 worth of gear and a cell phone that never rang. So put those dreams of Reds and Cook anamorphics on the back burner while you get the actual business concerns taken care of. Figure out what is mission critical and only invest in those pieces, knowing that if you don't remain solvent, the whole thing falls apart really quickly. But figuring out what you need to run your business doesn't get you across the finish line. It doesn't even get you out of the starting gate. Once you know what you need, and I mean need for your business to survive, you have to make those purchases. When you're just starting out, even minor purchases can feel like a monumental challenge. We'll get into how to approach that in a moment, but first I want to say that if you're feeling any stress about dumping huge wads of cash into something that may or may not bring returns, don't engage emotionally with the process. I've been at this 20 years, and there's always another thing to buy or upgrade or license. If I'd felt any stress about those purchases, I'd be reduced to a quivering husk by now. It never ends, and every upgrade cycle seems to add another zero to the bottom line. Even if you're not engaged emotionally, though, making those purchases can still be tough. I mean, really tough. We'll do another video on taking on debt for the sake of your business, but suffice to say that I'm a little more liberal with debt than a lot of my contemporaries. There are a lot of folks who take the "if you can't buy two with cash, you shouldn't be buying one" approach. This is great advice if you have cash. If you don't have cash, that's basically taking yourself off the playing field voluntarily and then wondering why nobody's passing to you. We absolutely took on financial debt to start the businesses, and we took on debt to keep them running. I don't want to get into the amount of financial debt that you should be taking on to run your business, because the reality is that I have no idea about your specific ambitions or the market in which you operate. Instead, I'd like to talk about the different kinds of debt that you should be considering as you go into a new line of business. There are 4 kinds of debt that we'll be going over, and you should be balancing all of them against each other as you go into a new venture. These 4 kinds of debt are financial, technical, theoretical, and real. We'll talk about financial debt first because it's the most common. I mean, we're pretty much having our dumb faces rubbed in it 24/7 anyway, so let's just get it out of the way. Financial debt is when you rent money. You give someone money to give you money, and then you have to keep giving them money until you've given them all the money. If you ever give them all the money, they immediately reach out and let you know that they'd like to rent you more money because you're so good at spending money, and you not spending money would be like Mozart not playing the piano. I'm just kidding. You'll never pay back all the money. That's the magic of financial debt. Let's talk about the other side of this debt coin. One that's less familiar and much less discussed: technical debt. When you buy a piece of equipment, it immediately starts aging. The camera landscape is fluid and constantly evolving. The gear you purchase isn't. That camera will always have the same limitations, and companies that purchase something else later on will have different, frequently less limiting limitations. The difference might not be that great in a year, but after 5 years, that technical debt can really weigh your company down. The same is true with software, though that investment tends to be more of a time investment than a hefty upfront purchase cost. There were a lot of editors deeply committed to Final Cut 7, and when Final Cut X was announced, the asset of that expertise was turned into a liability overnight. If you spend 1,000 hours isolating your workflow in Premiere, that's 1,000 hours you didn't put into Resolve. That's technical debt that you're accumulating, and you'll feel it when a job passes you by because the client wants the project done in Resolve and not Premiere. I'll give you a perfect example of technical debt from our business. When it became clear that multicam coverage was a service that our clients liked, we bought 3 Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K cameras. Those cameras could match our 6K and tie into the ATEM workflow we were already using. Micro Four Thirds meant that we could afford to purchase matching lenses in triplicate and do so with cash. We could have purchased 3 Ursas with EF or PL lenses and had a kit that was a bit more future-proof, but that would have meant taking on financial debt instead of technical debt. The reality is that Micro Four Thirds is getting a little long in the tooth. Blackmagic Pocket 4K cameras are functional, but certainly not impressive, so we now have a kit with 3 cameras that are incredibly not competitive. They sit often unused, and when they are used, it's as a C camera or for behind-the-scenes snapshots. That's technical debt in a nutshell, and we have that technical debt because we didn't want financial debt on our multicam upgrade. As you go into year 1 purchases, balancing financial debt against technical debt should be at the front of your mind. I'm not saying that you should be using the threat of technical debt to justify taking on more financial debt, though. Neither one of them is good or bad debt, they're just different. And the better you understand how they will impact your business, the easier it will be to move forward with intelligence and confidence. So let's get into those differences. Financial debt compounds. Your minimum payments on credit cards cover the interest. You can pay that forever if you want, the same way that you can rent a DVD for the rest of your life, as long as you don't mind paying $3 a week for it. Technical debt, on the other hand, is pretty static. It's not like the camera is going to lose resolution over the years or change sensor size. One day the camera will break, and when that day comes, you have neither an asset nor a liability. You have a doorstop. Until then, though, the camera is the camera is the camera. The other huge difference is that financial debt chews on everything. Technical debt chews on itself. When you have a company with financial problems, every department is threatened equally, regardless of their involvement in the purchase. Cash is a resource every corner of the business will need to push forward steadily, and everybody won't have enough of it simultaneously if anybody doesn't have enough of it. Technical debt is only a burden to the exact department in which it exists. For example, the aging Blackmagic 4Ks don't affect the work our accountant does. That technical debt is isolated from post-workflow, the media we shoot on, the other cameras in our kit. Heck, even the lenses aren't aging out of usefulness as quickly as the camera bodies. Understanding how technical debt and financial debt balance against each other will prove essential for the ongoing success of your business. Also important is the difference between real debt and theoretical debt. Real debt feels much more dangerous because it's, well, real. However, theoretical debt is infinitely more dangerous and something we focus a lot of energy on. Theoretical debt is all the money you lost because you aren't able to execute on your responsibilities correctly. For example, we did a job for eBay. It went really well, and the manager above the person who hired us reached out to discuss future jobs. Unfortunately, the submission page on our website wasn't working, and I didn't get the email until several months after it had been sent. When I finally replied, the manager told me that they had gone with another vendor, and they'd reach out again if they needed us. Spoiler alert, they never needed us. Every penny that I don't have because of the glitch on our website is theoretical debt. Lord knows what it might have become. Maybe 1 gig and then we never heard from them again. Maybe a down payment on a house. The fact that you don't know the exact amount of the theoretical debt your company has taken on does nothing to reduce the sting of the fact that it's your fault that the debt exists. Now, just like technical debt, please don't think that theoretical debt should be used to justify endless accumulation of real debt. If you're sitting there thinking, he's right, just imagine all the jobs I won't get if I don't buy an Arri Alexa and a set of Cook lenses right now, you've missed the entire point of this video. I'm saying that you have to be cognizant of the balance between financial debt and technical debt, as well as theoretical debt and real debt as you go into year one purchases. It's a lot to chew on, and here comes the really bad news. I can't tell you how to apply it to your business. Frankly, I don't know what your business is. You know what you're trying to build, your market, your field of expertise, and your general disposition better than I ever could. All of those concerns play into how you should be approaching year one purchases. And the broader the scope of your business, the more complicated these answers will become. For example, if you plan to go into cinematography, you're probably thinking about cameras and lenses. If your focus is producing, you are responsible for making sure each department has the resources they need to execute successfully on an end-to-end pipeline. Cameras and lenses are one piece of that very large puzzle. So, how do you cure this very expensive ambiguity baked into year one purchases? Patience, experimentation, and a very good relationship with your rental house. Let's break those three down. First up is patience. You aren't going to have all the answers on day one. You have a vision for your business, but the reality is that the market is going to negotiate the exact shape of what you're building. It's impossible to guess market demand with 100% accuracy, so as you're planning your first year of operation, bake a little bit of flexibility into your mission statement. The exact needs of your business will reveal themselves over the course of the first year, and that means you should not be doing all of your purchases up front. If you invest in a really beefy cinema camera package and then 3 months in you realize that all of your clients want multicam solutions for streaming, you've painted yourself into a corner where you either have to buy several more beefy cinema camera packages so all the cameras in your kit match, or let that cinema camera collect dust while you go out and buy a bunch of other kits more appropriate for multicam pipelines. If something like that happens, it's your fault, not the client's. Beyond patience, you're going to have to experiment, and you really don't want to be experimenting on the client's dime. Like I said, all friction and challenges should be invisible to the client. Do we try new ideas on client shoots? Of course we do, all the time. But we do that after the second or third stage of redundancy on mission-critical concerns. Experiments never touch the core product we're delivering. We do the bulk of our experiments on internally generated projects and have budgeted about 25% of our net for those projects. And we push the edges to the edge of the edges on those projects. If we aren't breaking things or noticeably failing on our internally generated projects, we don't feel like that money was well spent. Finally, build a good relationship with a rental house. In your first couple of years, it makes way more sense to rent the beefy monster camera on the handful of shoots that will use it than it does to buy that camera outright. Also, renting gives you the opportunity to test different builds and learn what gear best suits your personality and the needs of your business. All of that is nice, but the relationship with the rental house really comes to life when you're coming up on a project that's bigger than anything you've done. When that day arrives, you want to already have rapport with someone at the rental house so you can call them, explain the parameters of the job, and talk through the solutions. They will know how to tie all of that gear together because that's all they do. That should be enough to get you started, and here's the good news. You don't have to take it all in on one watch through. What you'll find is that a lot of what I've said reveals itself naturally throughout the course of your first year in business. My hope with this video is that we've reduced your upfront financial burden and given you some tools to approach the structure of your business with a bit more precision. If it turns out that this was useful for you, please consider subscribing, as it's very likely we'll release another video that's similarly useful. If you disagree with anything I've said, please leave a comment below and we can hash it out. And when you're done with that, please turn off YouTube and don't go purchase a whole bunch of expensive gear. Oh, and Happy New Year! You made it! We all made it. Somehow.